Who will be the New York Mets starting center fielder next year? I'll break down some of their options on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Who will be the New York Mets starting center fielder in 2025? Will it be a free agent, a trade acquisition, or is it somebody that is already in the Mets organization? Will they move Brandon Nimmo back into center field? Will it be Tyrone Taylor, or will one of the top prospects make their way up to the big league roster and to grab a starting spot? It's a lot to go through, and I really wasn't sure where I landed on this when I started to go through this thought exercise today. Here's the place that I landed, and I didn't expect I would get there. I believe Brandon Nimmo should be the Mets starting center fielder again in 2025. Now, how did I get to that process? Well, let's look at last year. The New York Mets ranked 22nd in wins above replacement from their center field position. 22nd. Harrison Bader came in, Tyrone Taylor also acquired. That was going to be where the Mets were going to go for center field production. They were going to lean on defense. They wanted to move Brandon Nimmo into a corner to play left field because long term, that is the best thing for Brandon Nimmo. And in a vacuum for Brandon Nimmo, I do believe his best position and the place that he should spend the majority of the remainder of his career should be left field. With that said, it's very hard to find center field production. And again, the Mets ranked 22nd in WAR, which is, again, wins above replacement. So the combination of offense, defense, base running. Overall production, bottom 10 in baseball. When it comes to offense, they're ranked 18th. So surprisingly, a little bit better than the all-encompassing stat of including the defense and the base running. Still not great. Look at what the Mets were when it came to center field production with Nimmo in 2022 and 2023. In 2022, Brandon Nimmo had a career year and a contract year. He was unbelievable. Second best WAR as a team when it comes to the center field position. It was Mariners 1, Mets 2. So it was Julio Rodriguez. Then it was Brandon Nimmo. You had Aaron Judge playing some center field, but not always in center field in 2022. And that's why we look at WRC+, that is the all-encompassing offensive stat. You had the Angels 1, Yankees 2. So that is, Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, Mariners 3, and then you had Mets 4. You look at 2023. Mets were third in WRC+ from center field behind the Cubs and the Mariners. Cubs, you're looking at Cody Bellinger. Mariners, again, Julio Rodriguez. They were ninth in WAR, which shows you a decline in defense by Brandon Nimmo. This past year, again, the Mets did not have great production in center field, but their defense was really good, right? In some metrics, yes. When it comes to defensive runs saved, the Mets were -6. When it comes to outs above average in center field, they ranked 14th with 10 outs above average. That was largely Harrison Bader, who ranked 10th. If you combine all these different stats that they measure when it comes to defense, Fangraphs will rank the different outfielders. And among center fielders, Harrison Bader ranked 10th. We watched him. He was still a very good defensive center fielder. Tyrone Taylor looked to be a very good defensive center fielder. The metrics told us he was more league average in center and plus in the corners. And then Brandon Nimmo, when he got out there, was below average, but he only played 144 innings in center field. He also was dealing with plantar fasciitis all year. How much did that hinder him defensively? We will never know. It certainly seemed like he was a little bit more timid out there this year. He also had that shoulder injury where he dove in and hurt his shoulder, and that made him a little bit more timid going in on the ball. To ask him to go back into center field, it is a very, very tall ask. The reason why I landed on Brandon Nimmo being maybe not the starting center fielder for the New York Mets all year, but I would say potentially the opening day starting center fielder for the Mets is just a lack of options. You look at the market, unless you're going to reunite with Harrison Bader, not a lot of good options. It's pretty much Harrison Bader and Michael A. Taylor, the same options we were looking at last year as guys you can sign to be your center fielder this season. And Michael A. Taylor had a worse year than Harrison Bader. So you could just re-sign Bader, but considering the fact that he lost the job to Tyrone Taylor, I don't know if that's the best move. I think I'd prefer the Mets signing a corner outfielder, knowing that they still have Tyrone Taylor as potentially the starting center fielder if all else fails. You have Nimmo you can move over. Then you have all the prospects. And that's where the hope lies in center field for the New York Mets is maybe your top prospect, Jett Williams, top position player prospect at least. It's either him or Brandon Nimmo at this point as far as the top prospect in the system. If Jett Williams can grab that job middle of the season, that is best case scenario. You have Drew Gilbert, another one of your top prospects. He did play some AAA this year. The problem with both Jett Williams and Drew Gilbert, these guys were hurt for a majority of the season. So right now they're in the Arizona Fall League just trying to get some reps, go into spring training in the best possible condition they can be to try to win the job. I just don't know if either of them is really going to be in that position in spring training. That's a lot to ask. And you can't go into spring with zero contingency plans. You can't. You have to have something in mind. Luisangel Acuna is another option. And it might be the Mets' best option. Because he was so amazing that 1 week replacing Francisco Lindor, if I had to poll the fans, and we probably will do that today, who do you want to be the Mets starting center fielder on opening day? If I put Acuna's name in that poll, I feel like he's going to win that poll because he flashed his upside. With that said, remember I told you guys during the season when Acuna came up and other times after that, when you looked at OPS in that international league in AAA where Acuna spent pretty much the entire season, and you look at qualified hitters and you rank them by OPS, I know Acuna was 78th, and I believe there's only 81 qualified hitters. So guys that got that amount of time playing in that league when it comes to on-base plus slugging, Luisangel Acuna was bottom of the barrel. Does that mean he can't hit? No, we saw the upside. We saw what he could do in the big leagues. But doing that over a large sample in the big leagues, that is also a tall ask. With all of that said, and with the elephant in the room being the Mets' pursuit of Juan Soto in free agency, I ultimately believe that moving Nimmo to center field to start the season, knowing that it's a lot easier for him to transition from center field back into left mid-year if one of those prospects can prove themselves. To me, that might be the best case scenario. I want to run through the different free agent options the Mets have at their disposal. Obviously, center field, it's limited, but what could they do in the corners that makes moving Nimmo to center field worth it? We'll talk about it in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You got the NBA season in full swing now as well. Also NHL, college football. There's so many things you could find over at FanDuel right now. And again, remember, you place that first $5 bet, do it on something you are supremely confident in, whether it is a overwhelming favorite in the NFL or in the NBA. You pick that team on the money line, they win that game, you're going to cash in that $150 in bonus bets by winning that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com and join today to get that $150 bonus bets offer if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets Insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get first look access into the show. I actually pre-recorded some shows this week because I'm going to be going out of town for a couple days on a bachelor party, and the Locked On Mets insiders already know what's coming later in the week. They have some of my inside access thoughts on a future topic. So if you want to be inside that loop, make sure you find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about the free agent options. And I don't want to hit you over the head with Juan Soto every single day, but we do understand that that is potentially the Mets' top target in this free agent class. What we haven't talked about nearly enough is how poor he is defensively. That is something you can't entirely overlook. He is, despite the two-time nomination to win a Gold Glove, to be a finalist there, and he's a finalist again this year, he's not a Gold Glove outfielder. This past year, he was passable, and it was playing right field in Yankee Stadium for half the time, which is historically an easier position to play because of that short porch than it is in other right fields in baseball. Citi Field is particularly one of them. It's a lot tougher to play right field at Citi Field than it is in Yankee Stadium. He was -1 defensive run save, -5 outs above average. These are just defensive metrics. 0 is obviously league average. Anything above that, above league average. -1 defensive run save, -5 outs above average. Paint some of the picture. You look at what he did in 2022 when he was playing right field, first for the Nationals, then for the Padres, -2 defensive run saved, -13 outs above average. When he played left field in 2023, he was -6 defensive run saved, -9 outs above average. Long term, Juan Soto, probably a DH. But the optics of putting Soto at DH at 26 years old on a $600+ million contract, it's not great. And I get the fans that say, man, why are you going to pay a DH that much money? The reason why you would is because he's that good of a hitter. He really is. Now, let's just say the Mets sign him. Where are you playing him then? You play him in left, you play him in right. I will say that his arm value, which is something you could find at Baseball Savant, he ranked in the 90th percentile for arm value, had a lot of outfield assists this year. But when it comes to arm strength, he's middle of the pack. So I would be really torn with what the Mets do with him. I guess I would say you're better off having Soto in right and Nimmo in left, but you better have a premium defensive center fielder if you're going to do that, in which case maybe you do re-sign Harrison Bader. I don't know. Or you roll with Tyrone Taylor, or you hope that Jett Williams can be a premium defensive center fielder. And long term, maybe that is where you end up falling, right? With Jett in center, Nimmo in left, Soto in right for the next, 3 to 5 years. And then eventually maybe one of Nimmo or Soto is phased to DH, the other one stays in left, and you just work around it. But if the Mets sign Juan Soto, their defensive outfield is going to take a hit. With that said, when it comes to free agency, again, there's not a lot of options to boost that center field defense, especially ones that actually hit for you. You got Bader, you got Taylor, you got Garrett Hampson, you have Manuel Margot. Of that list, none of them are above average hitters. You have Kike Hernandez, but it seems like Kike is only amazing in a Dodgers uniform, and after the playoff run he just had, I can't see him going anywhere else. So you then look at the corner spots. Again, Soto, the top option, but you also have Anthony Santander, Teoscar Hernandez, Jurickson Profar, and Tyler O'Neill, the other guys that I would deem, no doubt about it, everyday players that all play in the corners. Santander is the most attractive bat, hit 44 home runs this past year. Teoscar Hernandez, we saw what he just did with the Dodgers. He was an all-star. You have Jesse Winker, of course, who the Mets could bring back in some form of platoon in right field with Starling Marte, or even a platoon at DH with Starling Marte. You could also reunite with Mark Canha, Michael Conforto, Tommy Pham. Those guys are on the market again, as is Adam Duvall, and a lot of the similar cast of characters that's sort of always banking on one-year deals year over year in free agency. When it comes to really improving through free agency in the outfield, to me, it really comes down to Santander, Teoscar Hernandez, or Soto. Tyler O'Neill is definitely another option, but he's a guy that was hurt this past year. Don't know how he's going to fare moving forward, if he's going to continue to be an injury-plagued player. Jurickson Profar was great this past year, but I still don't know if I buy that on a multi-year deal, and it feels like his superpowers are reserved for San Diego. So with that said, obviously the best outfield option would be Soto, but even if it is Santander or Teoscar Hernandez, that's not going to address your need in center field. So you're either going to go into opening day with Tyrone Taylor as your starting center fielder, you're going to trust a Luisangel Acuna come opening day, or maybe a Jett Williams or Drew Gilbert surprises and wins a job in camp, or you move Nimmo back into center. Again, you sign one of these guys to bolster your offense, and you're just going to roll offense instead of defense going into next season. You're going to hope that Brandon Nimmo at 32 years old can turn the clock back to 2022 and be a passable defender in center. And maybe as the year wears on, you might finally get that prospect that can take over the position. Long term, I think the Mets have a lot of intriguing options in center field. But do I believe that Jett Williams, Acuna, or Drew Gilbert is going to be ready come opening day to be the starting center fielder every day for the New York Mets? I fall pretty short of that. The only other alternative is to hit the trade market. And I only found a single candidate that I really liked. And actually, I don't even know if I'd say I really liked. A candidate that I like at all to be the starting center fielder for the New York Mets next year via trade. So we're going to talk about who that is in the final segment. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Tonight, I actually live in South Florida, for those of you who don't know, and I am going to be going to a Miami Heat game. Pull open the Game Time app right now. I'm seeing seats as low as $28 a ticket if I'm looking at sort of those outer sections, the 300, 400 sections. Seeing tickets, $89 even in the lower bowl, and those tickets are only going to get cheaper. I'm not buying now. I'm going to wait till I am walking towards the arena. I'm in Miami, and then I'm going to pull open the Game Time app, and I'm going to buy my tickets then, because Game Time is the place to go for last-minute tickets. And I love the Game Time Picks feature, which filters out the fluff and shows you only the best possible deals on great seats, so don't waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 15,000 subscribers by opening day, and to get there, we have to get to 11,000 subscribers first, and we are getting closer and closer. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, let's talk about trade options, and I landed on one. I really did, because I am looking through the league right now, and to be completely honest, I think center field is the weakest position in all of baseball. You're just not going to find very many guys that can impact the baseball offensively and field that position at a premier level in center. It's just really tough. I think center field has I think catcher has leapfrogged over center field from being the weakest position, because all of a sudden we got some pretty good catchers around the game that can do both. Center field, it's a lot tougher to find, guys. And here's where I ended up identifying the only trade target that makes sense to me, and maybe others will pop up as we get through the offseason, but the only guy that caught my eye was Cedric Mullins of the Baltimore Orioles. Now, you might remember Mullins from 2021 when he had a career year. He was a 30-30 guy in center field, played great defense, won a Silver Slugger, finished top 10 in MVP voting, finished 9th. Since then, he hasn't cleared 20 home runs. So that 30 home run power, it was a mirage. It wasn't real, but he has stolen 30 bases multiple times since then. Doesn't play elite defense in center field, but he's a much better athlete than Brandon Nimmo. Still brings, again, that speed to the bases and is a league average center fielder at least. He's in a contract year. The Orioles, despite new ownership, are still a small market team. Maybe it's time to extract some value for Cedric Mullins. Also, they have a ready-made replacement, as Colton Cowser could be their opening day center fielder from jump. They know they have a guy that might win Rookie of the Year still. Don't know how that race is going to finish out, but regardless, he can be their guy for the next 5 years if they want him to be. They also have further down the pipeline a prospect that they really like, Enrique Bradfield Jr., Vance Honeycutt. They have some other outfield options that are making their way through the system. Currently, the guys that are close to the big leagues, Dylan Biebers and Judd Fabian, didn't really have great years. So I think overall their outfield depth may preclude them from trading Mullins because you're looking at their situation. If Anthony Santander signs elsewhere, their outfield's going to be Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, and then I don't know. My guess would be the third outfielder, if they move Mullins, would be Jordan Westburg. He has been more of an infielder throughout his career and a good one, and he's coming off his first full season. But what I'd say about Jordan Westburg is he is athletic, and you do have some other options in the infield that you could roll with, kind of a crowded infield. You have Gunnar Henderson, who's going to stay your shortstop. Jackson Holliday looks to be the second baseman of the future. They're going to run him back out there next year, even though it's certainly a mixed season. And Kobe Mayo should be ready to go, and you can play him at third base. So that does leave Westburg without a positional home, and he's obviously worthy of being out there. Can't remember if he ever got to the All-Star game as an injury replacement or he just remained a snub, but he certainly was an All-Star caliber player in the first half. You can go into next year with Westburg, Cowser, and Kjerstad. It would be a very young and exciting outfield, and they could always sign a free agent to be a stopgap in the corners, whatever it is. They got options if they wanted to move Mullins and try to get some prospect value for him. Now, when it comes to his value to the Mets, 1-year deal, a guy that probably isn't going to hit much better than a 720 OPS, maybe at best, probably more likely falls somewhere between 700 and 710. So not a great hitter. He does have that 15 to 20 home run pop, hasn't eclipsed 20 home runs since his 30 home run season, but he did hit 18. So somewhere in that range. Will still probably swipe 30 bases, which is a good value to have. Maybe you bat Mullins ninth, sort of a double leadoff situation. He's an option that I like. I don't love him, but I could get on board with Cedric Mullins as a stopgap, essentially, right? And look, ultimately, if one of your prospects takes his job at the end of the year, that's a good problem to have. But he's a target, I would say. But again, is he on the market for sure? Because of how thin the Orioles could get in the outfield, he might not be. So the more and more I look at this, I think the Mets are kind of in between a rock and a hard place in center field because there's just not a lot of external options. And I thought that Harrison Bader was definitely gone. And the more and more I think about it, I'm not entirely sure that's the case. I mean, Harrison Bader might be the guy. I don't know. Maybe they just decide, look, good clubhouse guy. Maybe they re-sign him. I don't know if they'd want to sign him for $10 million again. I don't know what his market is. He's going to go back into the market again just based on the position and be arguably the best center fielder available. So it's really hard to gauge this market. It's just tough. Tyrone Taylor, I say, is your floor. He's your floor center fielder. You went through the playoffs with him. He could be your starting center fielder. You're not going to lose anything defensively with him out there. He has some pop. Might run into some home runs, but it wasn't a good offensive season for him overall. And even though I thought the at-bats were good in the playoffs and he had some big hits, you look at the overall numbers, he was not good. Acuna is maybe second best of your internal options. Maybe he is the highest ceiling option for a start-to-finish player. What I mean by that is Acuna, I think, will be more ready come opening day than Jett Williams or Drew Gilbert because he just had an entire season in AAA. He went through the grind. He went through the struggle. One of the ringing endorsements that Acuna came up to the big leagues with from his AAA manager was the fact that he was unfazed by his struggles. And I think he would be a good defensive center fielder. So maybe it's Acuna. And I wouldn't be mad at that. The more that I look at this situation, Acuna as your starting center fielder at least gives you an upside that Tyrone Taylor does not possess. I think the Mets are waiting on Jett Williams, honestly. Drew Gilbert is playing right field in the Arizona Fall League. I think that is very telling. The Arizona Fall League is a place where you have all these different prospects that are trying to get time. I don't know who else is on that roster, but I also believe that the Mets has something to say about where this guy would play. And the fact that he's getting a lot of time in right field, to me, is indicative of the fact that the Mets maybe look at Jett Williams and say, do we really want to waste our top prospect's athleticism at second base? Especially when you have Acuna as an option there. You have Ronnie Mauricio as an option there. Heck, you have Brett Beatty as an option there now. You have Jeff McNeil, who's under contract for a couple more years. Jett Williams as a second baseman is not going to bring you the value that he could bring you out in center field. And you look at what Jackson Merrill did, going from AA straight to the big leagues and being one of the most impactful players on the San Diego Padres. Could Jett Williams do that? Potentially, but he's coming off a lost year. That's what makes it so much more difficult to predict. This is where I come back to the idea of maybe you move Nimmo into center field. It really depends on who the Mets sign in the corners. Are they re-signing Pete Alonso? So Juan Soto going back to the Yankees, and the Mets are just bringing back Jesse Winker and running back the playoff lineup and adding a ton of pitching. I think that's a horrible outcome because, as we talked about when the season ended, the offense wasn't the problem. The offense isn't the reason the Mets weren't able to get past the Dodgers. One of the reasons was the Dodgers were clearly the best team in baseball, but also it was the Mets running out of steam with their pitching. That has to be the top priority this offseason outside of getting a generational talent at 26 years old in Juan Soto. So the Mets could just say, you know what? We're going to go with what got us 2 wins away from the World Series. We're going to start with Tyrone Taylor. We are going to bring back Jesse Winker, and we're going to keep Pete Alonso, and we are just going to run back this team in the first couple months of the season, and you hope that at some point Jett Williams or Acuna or Gilbert grabs that job and runs with it. It's a tough problem to figure out, though, so we'll see what the Mets do. That's what the offseason is for. There are so many different possibilities. It could be Nimmo. It could be Taylor. It could be Bader. It could be Acuna. It could be Gilbert. I don't know. Maybe David Stearns gets crazy and decides to start Jeff McNeil in center field. I literally have no idea. Any other position, I feel a pretty good amount of, or I have a short list that makes sense to me. Third base, it's either going to be Mark Vientos, Brett Beatty, most likely, right? Maybe Ronnie Mauricio, but I feel like third base is probably one of those 3 guys. First base, Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, or a stopgap that they signed. We talked about that. Actually, we did not talk about that. That's coming up later this week. Pre-recorded episode. Catcher, it's going to be Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens. Second base, Jeff McNeil, Acuna, potentially Iglesias coming back. There's just some clarity in a lot of these spots. Outfield is anyone's guess. Center field in particular is just a conundrum. And we'll see how David Stearns tries to solve it. I did not have them signing Harrison Bader last offseason, especially after they traded for Tyrone Taylor. Just didn't see that in the cards, and it surprised me, and ultimately it worked out for the most part. We'll see what they do this time around. For tomorrow's show, we got a lot of decisions around baseball that will have been made. Options are going to be decided on Monday. So any other club option, player option has to be resolved. For the Mets, Sean Manaea has already indicated he will be opting out, so we know that one. Phil Maton, the club option, has not been decided yet. So we'll be talking about those 2 guys to some extent. I'll go around the league, some other interesting things that happened. Devin Williams will be on the market, it seems like. We'll talk about that a little bit. Could the Mets get the guy that Pete Alonso hit the homer off of to be the 8th inning guy to Edwin Diaz? There's a lot we'll have to chew on when it comes to action around the league. So make sure if you're listening on the audio side, you follow so you don't miss the show. You're subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Also, rate and review the show. That really helps. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Follow me on X or on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. You can follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. And after your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.